Good afternoon. It's Pop again, Dennis Murray. Uh, I'm chuckling because after I record, I always listen to before I put it up on YouTube. And I recorded with the microphone on, all right. Yeah, that's good. Except that I had moved it out of the way when I was working on something. So it was like 3 feet away on the ground, and the sound level is just unacceptable. So I had to erase the damn thing. So, we're going to stay chill because it's already 2 o'clock and I haven't had lunch and I'm kind of hungry, and it'll probably make me be more focused and maybe even more to the point, and a little briefer. so, uh, I have some leftover pizza. I'm looking forward to a beer and a couple of slices of pizza. Okay, let's just get right to it. Okay, so today is a Popcast 87, and it's called Nature's Wisdom, Part 37. Um, so I guess I want to talk more about what's in Eric Hoffer, the True Believer, because he gives us information about things that we should try to avoid. Um, and just as much as I also want to keep talking about the civic practice of celebrating nature's wisdom, because it gives us something that may help from the positive side. In both cases, avoiding things and helping from the positive side, what we're trying to deal with is the Great Divide. The extreme level of divisiveness in our country that includes a lot of anger and a fair amount of hate and a lot of lack of appreciation of difference, and really just not, uh, there's the absence of a coherent ground for appreciating people who are quite different in a number of ways from ourselves. And on the one hand, I want to show why intellectual arrogance is unfounded. That's a major contributor to the Great Divide. I want to show why religious smugness is unfounded. That's a contributor to the Great Divide. There are plenty of smug people who are not religious, and there are plenty of religious people who are not smug. But there can be a certain contribution to the Great Divide from a sense that I've got the answers, and unless you join my church, you don't. And I have, a little pity, but mostly no real interest in you unless you're listening to what I say is the name of God and the particulars of God. And I'm not really interested in hearing what you say is the name of God or the particulars of God. So there's a lot of that goes on amongst us. And it's essentially intellectual smugness, somewhat equivalent to it's a religious smugness, but it's equivalent to intellectual arrogance. It's a harm to the community and to yourself. Um, and it's part of the package that we all share. And as a person who's, I won't say born and raised, but who, as a young man and until middle age, was full of intellectual arrogance, um, and then I'm not just accusing others. I'm acknowledging that I'm as much a sinner as other people. And I'm very, very grateful that because of the good fortune I had in marrying a woman of enormous common sense, I was able to lose some of that intellectual arrogance and gain some appreciation for common sense. Um, so That's the context. Now, I want to say also here at the beginning, because what we're going to do for particulars today is read some sections from The True Believer from Eric Hoffer's book and talk about him a little bit. But I want to say that I have this morning thought of a name for the civic practice that I've been referring to. Um, the the name that I think works is self and other. So, you know, imagine you're at a NASCAR race and they open the race with a prayer, and then they have, the Pledge of Allegiance or sing the national anthem. And then I imagine if, the owner of the track said, well, next we're going to have, Joe Smith do the self and other. And everybody understands Joe is going to remind us all in some words or phrases briefly, like, 5, 10 sentences. He's going to remind us that we all have the sense of the sacred in our psychology, in the heart of our psychology. It's where our psychology begins, and it's where our energy to live begins, and that we share this with each other. So we are both a comfort and a support to each other, and that would be self and other, and it could be that it becomes, a typical event at public gatherings. Oh yeah, here's Fred on self and other, and Fred chooses some words, um, but they'd be short and to the point of let's all remember that we share this sense of the sacred, and that we are a gift to each other, and we both give and take, the comfort and support of each other, and we need it in order to thrive as a people. A reminder, and it's a reminder that comes from our psychology, as religion does, but it doesn't depend on a belief in a particular name of God. Um, just in the reality of this psychological event that's going on in us that has a huge amount to do with why our species has thrived so much. Um, so, but I think having a name for it, self and other, is helpful. So, I've been talking for years in my writings, and I've written, a number of books that I don't recommend that you run out and buy, because I think each time I write a book, I'm better than the other one. But now with these talks, I think I've progressed quite a bit beyond the books. So, um, but I've been dealing for years, with the concept of awe and and the concept of the gift of each other, but I didn't have those words for them always. And each time I find words for concepts, it helps a little bit. Um, but now I like this phrase, nature's wisdom, as something that pulls together the three major elements, that I think are an important part of our view of ourselves and each other. That's for the sake of our psychological comfort. That we have an experience of awe in our psychology. That means it gives us a sense of the sacred as the starting place of our psychology. And secondly, that we have the gift of self in each other, that we turn immediately to each other in the hope that the same awe is found in each other, and we find it there over time and in the face of difficult circumstances. It becomes plain to us that, oh yeah, well, the other guy's got pretty much the same thing going on, though he interprets it quite differently and uses words quite differently than I did describe it, or maybe considerably less aware of it, in himself than I am. But it seems like the same stuff is going on. He's taken energy from hope, and he's sharing somewhat in the gift of each other. Maybe wholeheartedly, maybe half heartedly, maybe scarcely at all. And of course, some of us have turned away. from the sense of the sacred and from each other. Um, and then you've got to face the gift of each other helps us face together death, hate, necessity, and unfairness that we see in the universe. So that's a lot of stuff to hang under one phrase, nature's wisdom, and then to turn around and take the practice of reminding us of nature's wisdom by creating it as a civic practice called self and other. That's another big plus. What I have, struggled to do is to create a framework that I could hang ideas on in such a way that you could have easy tag names for them, but also that you can see how they're related to each other. Oh, yeah, well, that's the left arm. Oh, that's the right elbow. Oh, that's the heart. That's the big Megillah. You know, so in bringing things together under simple names like nature's wisdom and self and other, you make it easier to plunk them on a frame that people can see how they're related. Oh yeah, well, nature's wisdom is the substance, self and other is a civic practice that reminds us of the substance. Because we need to be reminded regularly. We need it to be discovered, which has been going on for a while, and progress is being made. And we need it to be named and hung on a rack so we can see how it's connected to other things on the rack. And so I have a sense of progress, and I'm encouraged. Now, the reason I keep going back to Hoffer is because our Great Divide includes a lot of complicated psychological factors, as well as economic factors. Some of the economic factors, Hoffer wasn't the first person to talk about, and they've come up from time to time, in recent centuries, and in earlier centuries. Economic situations can create a good deal of distress. And so, of course, it's complicated to figure out how to arrange our economy so that it both thrives and people have a sense of fairness from it. And that economy remains I took economics at freshman year of college and sophomore year, and I should have said sophomore year, and I've been a professor, and Dr. Solterer, an Austrian and a man of great gifts, great humanity. And a quick story. 25 years after college, I began to do some serious writing, and I wrote him a letter and attached a copy of, a writing I had done, 25, 30 pages. And I got back a wonderful letter from him saying, I don't remember you. I had, for 35 or 40 years of students. But I feel immediately that I'm home, that I had this sense of, of being in a foreign land, being a stranger in a foreign land, and coming back home. The things that you're talking about, are so much home for me to hear. And it was really, really encouraging. But then he invited me to call him, gave me his phone number, and in the course of the conversation, he talked about duality, and he talked about it from a certain point of view. And I didn't know beans about duality, and I was immediately scared that it must be important. I don't want a revered leader's thoughts to keep me from reaching my own thoughts whenever I figure out what this is and I'm ready to deal with it. So I hesitated to have the personal meeting that he offered. And by the time I got over my hesitation and went to set up the personal meeting, he was in his final illness and died. Um, I've had that experience with one or two other people. I just shied away from somebody who might have been a wonderful help to me because I wasn't confident yet that I had formed my own well founded self and stance of myself to the world. And so I resisted and I was very slow on the uptake. It was only really in relatively very recent years that I felt like I reached some kind of a well-founded sense of self, well-footed stance towards the world, and am more willing to, read and risk being influenced by others because I have my own point of view. Um, So that's a long side story, sorry, and I'm missing lunch while I'm telling these stories. Maybe I better quit. But um, the 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 thing is, so economics are complicated. That's what the Dr. Salter story started to be about. But then it leads into the next story that our psyche is incredibly complicated, and that we need to think about colds and flus of the soul just like we have colds and flus of the body, and make a comparison and discover that as difficult as it is for us to tell our doctors with care the details of what feels like it's off in our bodies, oh well, I have this condition, I have that condition, this is what happens in that circumstance. Those are things that the doctor needs to know in order to figure out what's going on. And if you forget to tell a salient detail, you might get a misdiagnosis. Um, I had a friend, a dear, dear friend, who didn't tell his doctor that he was taking chondroitin because nobody asked. And he started to show some major problems with his muscles. And turns out that chondroitin and certain prescription medicines he was taking don't like each other big time and caused him to have symptoms of muscular problems, which the doctors diagnosed as a fatal disease and told him, say goodbye to your family. You have a relatively short time left. And by a happy chance, they were able to figure out that their diagnoses had to be wrong because he was actually getting a little bit better from physical therapy. And they said, there's no way physical therapy could be helpful to that condition we've diagnosed. It's not possible. And somehow it came out that he was taking chondroitin, and everybody shook their head and said, oh my God, thank goodness. So we can fix that, but we couldn't fix the other thing. And so my friend, of course, in the meantime, had eaten a hell of a lot of great big thick steaks with all the gristle on them, the stuff that tastes really good on the barbecue when you grill the hell out of, shot searing and raw inside, rare inside. Yeah, well, of course, his cholesterol was through the roof and it damn near killed him. So, but okay, so diseases are complex. Well, diseases of the psyche are a lot more complicated, and they're a lot harder to diagnose because they're a lot harder for you to report accurately. And you can't I mean, it's very difficult to figure out where something that's going on inside your psyche is normal or not, is part of a problem or just, a passing a thing of no importance. Um, I mean, to be a little crude, you don't report every fart you make to the doctor as a medical symptom. Every time you burp, it's not a medical symptom. But sometimes there's a condition called GERD where you're having some uh, harm done to your palate and your larynx from acidic fluids that are gurgling up from your stomach. And, so it's, not all that different from burping, but you better know the difference and you better know when to report it. Well, when it comes to the psyche, you can't tell. Was that a burp or is that GERD? GERD is something like gastroenteroliflux disease. I think that's how you get GERD. Okay, so, but there's GERD of the psyche as well, and I'm not going to start reading a bunch of quotes from Hoffer today because I've spent the time talking in generalities. But I think the generalities are important to create the framework. Why are we reading Hoffer? Hoffer. Why are we talking about Hoffer? Because he gives us some clues to things. And some of the things he talks about are economics, which, as I told you from Dr. Stolterer, is extremely complicated and poorly understood and difficult to manage. But a lot of what Hoffer is talking about is from our psychology. And I'm going to identify piece, and many pieces from our psychology that he says contribute to these massive organizational movements that are often marked by hate. And so we need to appreciate that our psychology is somewhat has colds and flus of the soul, and that we know a lot less about them than we do of colds and flus of the body. And that appreciation helps us keep our hopes and the energy of hope flowing in the face of the frightening anger and animosity that's, large among us today. We can survive the Great Divide, and we can get better at treating each other, rearranging our social arrangements a little differently so as to make things better. But they're never going to be great, and there's always going to be anxiety, anger, and tension. And we can help ourselves positively to soften that by this, appreciation of nature's wisdom exhibited by the civic practice called self and other. So enough time for pizza and a beer. Okay, maybe 2 beers. I get 2 slices of pizza. What the hell? See you tomorrow. Take care.